Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I have a question for you guys. Did you know that Koreans today consume 20% less fruit than they did 15 years ago? Ongoing problem that has gotten worse in recent years, in fact a lot worse with inflation, and it's become very acute to the point that in the last year the price of all fruits has increased by 40%, and it's been particularly acutely felt in the most popular fruits, which are tangerines and apples. And so prices there have increased by, in the same period over the past year, by 71% and 78% respectively. And so I'm here today outside this place, which is called No Brand. This is a very cheap, very consumer-oriented supermarket, but we're going to go in and we're going to check out the prices there, and then we're going to find some other places and see what it looks like, because the prices of fruit are, again, very expensive. So let's go check it out. Okay guys, here's a bag of oranges. So oranges and tangerines, like I told you, really went crazy. The price is up 71% over the past year. So that's the price in Korean won right there. You get a 2-kilogram bag of those oranges for 18,900 won, which is, I mean, that's what it looks like. That's about $15. So that's not the greatest deal. The other thing which really blows my mind is this right here. So this bag of apples, so 5 or 6 apples in the bag, 17,900 won, that's like $14. And so that's roughly 78% higher than it was just a year ago. It's pretty wild out here. And like I said, this place is one of the cheapest places to shop. In fact, I come here pretty regularly, again, because it is so cheap. But again, all that stuff over there, all that fruit is probably 40% more expensive than it was just a year ago. And those oranges that I showed you and those apples that I showed you should pretty much be 70 to 80% higher than they were just a year ago. So things are getting pretty serious around here, and let's go find some other kind of more average shops to see if we can find the prices there, because again, this is a cheap place. This place is called No Brand. But let's keep going. Okay guys, before we just go in and check it out, at least let me substantiate what I've been saying this whole time. So let me very quickly read this for you. In January and February this year, fruit prices jumped almost 40% from a year ago, the steepest surge in 32 years. Tangerines and apples, the two most popular fruits, saw their prices soar 71% and 78% respectively. But despite the price of fruit being so high here, there's also a short-term problem which has caused it to spike even higher. Per the report that I read, the production of apples and pears decreased by 30% last year, and so obviously that would serve to spike prices. But again, that was only apples and pears. So we saw that with the 30% decrease in production of apples, that there was kind of basically a concomitant increase in apple prices of roughly 70%. But that tells us nothing about what happened with the price of oranges, and nor does it tell us anything about the rise in prices in all other fruits, right, which also rose by 40%. I found more apples right here. So 4 to 6 apples is 17,000 won, which is pretty expensive. That's what you're going to get there. It's like, this is the equivalent of about 12 US dollars, so still pretty expensive. And then if we go over here, I found oranges. These are pretty similar to what we saw before. So these are marked way down to 10,000 won from 20. So still pretty expensive. So wherever you go here, and all of this stuff is probably way up too. So inflation is a huge problem here, as it is everywhere else, and it's really coming through in the prices of all of these foods, but especially that stuff which I showed you back there. And we can walk around and around, and I'm sure we'll find the same thing at every other place we go to. The price of fruit is going to be like 40% more expensive. If we want to get apples, it's going to be 70% more expensive than it was a year ago. And if we want to get oranges, it's going to be 80% more expensive than it was a year ago. So this is obviously a big problem, but it's not a new problem because, as I said at the beginning, the price of fruit has pretty much always been expensive in Korea. So the question kind of becomes, how does the Korean consumer react to these crazy increases in price for fruit, and especially for the two most popular, which are tangerines and apples? Well, it looks like it's probably getting worse for Korean consumption of all fruits. So again, the report that I'm kind of referencing said that fruit consumption is basically declined by like 20% over the past 15 years. And that was the period, the 15 years prior to 2022. So it was already down 20% by then, but that doesn't account for what's happened in the most recent 2 years. So anyway, the point being, things are certainly getting worse. The other point to note is sort of an economic one, which is that basically prices for fruit are very elastic in Korea, meaning that if the demand is very elastic. So if the prices jump up, basically Korean consumers are just going to buy less of whatever product it is. So that's precisely what's happened with fruit consumption, and it's become a real problem, especially for, again, those two most popular fruits, which are tangerines and apples. But it's also affecting a bunch of other foods, which is prompting a reaction from the government. What is the reaction? Well, let's look at it right here. I'll just read this for you. This is from the same article. So, in order to tackle the chronic supply shortages of fruits and other agricultural items, Agriculture Minister Song Mi-ryung held an emergency press conference Thursday, during which she pledged to establish a consultative body for fruit production while expanding financial support for farmers. We will invest 20.4 billion won from March to April to lower the prices of 13 items, including apples and green onions, the minister said. She also hinted at expanding imports to alleviate the supply issues, especially for apples and pears. Ultimately, though, this problem with prices of fruit and tangerines and apples in particular is just kind of a bigger indication of what's going on with inflation in Korea, which is by no means an issue that's isolated to this country. It's certainly something that's going on everywhere else. I came here from the US, and it's been going on there for several years since the pandemic, and so this is what happens when inflation becomes a problem. It might kind of manifest as the price of apples jumping up by 80% in one nation, or the price of tangerines going up by 70% and the price of fruit going up by 40% overall. But regardless if it's that, it can manifest as another thing, and I'm sure there are similar stories everywhere going on. So hopefully, this country can figure it out, because this is a big issue.